Well, in letter number 11, Screwtape talks to Wormwood about the uses of laughter. Wormwood has told Screwtape that these people are great laughers, but some laughter is useful and other laughter is not. So Screwtape is helping Wormwood narrow down which are the forms of laughter that you should be encouraging and which are the forms of laughter that are a waste of time. So Screwtape says that there are basically four causes for laughter: joy, fun, what he calls joke proper, and flippancy. Now, the first two are not useful for the devils at all. Joy is something that arises from people, let's say, who haven't seen each other a while and come together, a reunion of family, of old friends, and they will laugh, but their laughter is not so much because of anything particularly funny that anybody's saying. It arises almost spontaneously, just from the happiness that they have around being around each other. Screwtape says this is like the emotion that we associate with music and with heaven. And Screwtape, in fact, speaks very disparagingly about music. He seems to think that music is something that's just awful. Now, this is something that he'll elaborate on in a later letter, but one of the things that I think people are surprised by when they read how much Screwtape dislikes music, they think that, well, wouldn't devils like music? I mean, wouldn't they like death metal or speed metal or punk or gangster rap? All of those forms of music are actually much, much too ordered for devils. People, when they think about those forms of music being bad, they're thinking about bad lyrics and they're thinking about high levels of volume. Even from a devil's point of view, that's too ordered. The very thing that devils dislike about music is the order that's present. Remember, what's at the heart of music is rhythm, harmony, melody. And those are all things that are in some way built on human nature and the nature of sound. And those are things that ultimately go back to God. That certain things sound good to us, that sound harmonic or melodious. Those are things which bother the devils because those share in the very order that God's created. Devils, we will find out later on, if they're going to like something, they're going to like noise. They want something with no order at all. So even though music out there, like rap music and death metal, may have all sorts of naughty lyrics, it doesn't quite do the job for a devil because it's still too ordered. It still has that simple or simplistic beat hammering away. And that, from the devil's point of view, is not noisy enough. Also, it's not perhaps surprising that devils associate music with heaven, that there's something about being in the divine presence which it overflows the senses, like what we associate with beautiful music. Well, fun. Fun is another source of laughter. And again, this is not something from Screwtape's point of view that's very useful. He describes it or defines it as kind of emotional froth arising from the play instinct. Think about puppies or kittens or little lion cubs rolling around on the ground, playing together. You know, they have a kind of fun in what they're doing. And we, as part of our animal nature, that's something that shows up in us as well. And when we think of fun as bad, it's because we're no longer enjoying things that are just sort of like tag or king of the hill or so on. We've worked our way to enjoyments that are perhaps more destructive. But just in the nature of kind of animal fun, the way young animals and young human beings just roll around and enjoy themselves, that's the kind of thing that Lewis is describing by fun. So if those things aren't useful for a devil, what is? Screwtape will distinguish joke proper, that is, something that really is told with the intention of making somebody laugh. And of course, the first kind of joke that you think of that would be useful would be something that's obscene. Screwtape says sometimes obscene humor works and sometimes it doesn't. There are some people who they really use obscene humor just because there's something unfitting. Screwtape will use the word incongruity, that what's happening in the joke is there are two things that don't quite fit together, and you're surprised when they're put together. And some of those things that you could put together will end up being off color or obscene. But they don't really do the job because they don't lower people's sense of shame, and they don't excite them to think about sexual things. So, for example, little boys can often be amused by the word "but" in almost any context and any reason. They're not somehow seeking to destroy somebody's purity or lower their sense of shame. Arguably, they don't have a great sense of shame themselves. But their intention is not to lower people's morality. It's simply that for them, this is a funny kind of thing, and the very mention of it to them is funny. It's different, however, for people who are taking things that are now off color or obscene and really using them to lower people's moral sense, to lower their sense of shame, and also to introduce sexuality in a bad way and in a corrosive way. Another way of that jokes can be used to lower people's sense of shame are what Lewis will describe as self-excusing humor. So the person who is habitually late and makes a joke about being late. Screwtape gives the example of somebody who is stingy, never quite pays for anything, but then makes a joke about how it is that he's leeching off his friends when they go out to lunch or when they go out to dinner. What's happening there is by turning the vice you have into a joke, you lose your ability to be ashamed and you lose your ability to reform. Somehow if people now criticize you for leeching off them, now if you can be funny about it, they're the problem if they're not amused. The most effective form of humor, Screwtape says, is flippancy. And by flippancy he means sarcasm about moral and religious subjects. It's not sarcasm in general, but sarcasm in particular about things that are supposed to be good or supposed to be admirable. So that you would make fun of actual goodness, that you would mock bravery, that you would mock generosity or devotion or self-sacrificial love. It takes real skill to make a joke. But the great thing about flippancy is that you act as if these things are ridiculous self-evidently. So that virtue, generosity, prayer, that these things are silly just by the fact that they're there. That's the kind of thing, Screwtape says, that creates a kind of armor plating around the patient from God. That if you have someone whose heart is closed because they simply ridicule the very things that are supposed to bring him to God, that is a hard shell to break through. So that's something that these worldly friends of the patients, they are people who are flippant, who are mocking. You'll see in a further letter, scoffers. And that's the very kind of habit of mind that and behavior that they want to encourage, that Screwtape and Wormwood want to encourage in the patient. Well, in our next letter, we will look at what is happening to the patient as a result of these friendships. How is it that the patient is moving further and further from his faith life and not even being aware of it?